Hello. This is the 168th Test from the Future, an experimental podcast from the year 2224, which we are sending from our present to yours. My name is Dirk.
And my name is Simon.
And we're putting the past in podcast. But before we get straight into it, we don't get straight into it. We had not one email or two. We had a bunch of emails about one thing you mentioned last episode.
Right, something offhand. Like I didn't think it would be, so I did not expect it to result in this many emails.
I think you said something like, back then when I used to have kids.
Yeah. Right, I mentioned that. The thing that people were writing about, they were surprised that I have had kids at all.
And we've never mentioned it before.
Sure, yeah, and I hadn't, like I said, I didn't think it was a big deal. I hadn't been avoiding the subject intentionally. It just hadn't come up. I mean, by now all my children, they're grown adults. It's not like I'm actively being a parent to them anymore. So it's not really something on my mind. It's not something we've had reason to talk about. And
it was never really a thing that came up in the show. Let's have an episode about kids or whatever. You didn't specifically avoid it, but never came up in a sideline.
Right, so far we haven't had exactly a topic for an episode. Be something where, like for example, if we would have been talking about schooling, then it would have made sense for me to mention, hey, this is what it was like when my own kids went to school. Something like that.
And we had an interview with a robot, interview with an alien, but we never had an episode interview with Simon's kid.
Yeah, or interview with a parent, I guess.
Yes. So a lot of people were just saying, what? Simon has kids? Tell us about it.
Yes, being surprised. Some people were being a bit too nosy, meaning wanting to know names and ages and like what are those kids doing now. And I say nosy because that's a bit nosy, that's personal. I'm not going to... that's up to my kids to talk about.
You're not going to mention their names?
I'm not going to mention their names. And
not how many they are?
No, if they want to make their own podcast that they send back 200 years in time, then our listeners will be able to hear.
Yes.
But I won't be the one divulging such information.
Are you going to mention the favorite soup?
No.
No? Shoe size?
None of that stuff.
No? Okay, cool. Well, then it's one of the mysteries that we leave unanswered. Until maybe we have...
if one of them wants to be a guest.
Yeah.
More than one of them. Maybe they'll be on the show with us.
Yeah.
But I will not push for that.
Okay, cool. Maybe the triplets. I'm
maybe.
just making stuff up.
Who knows? I know, but our listeners don't know.
Okay. Today, we speak about Deja Vus.
Deja Vu, yeah?
Yeah, one or many.
That's right. I thought it was like you were misspeaking, but to your point, that's what we are talking about.
Is it how you multiply?
The plural form of it? I've never heard it before, so that's why...
One déjà vu, two déjà vus. I think it's French, right? So the plural would probably also still be déjà vu.
It sounds like it, but I also don't know French.
Un déjà vu, deux déjà vu. Trois. Okay, that's about it for my French. So I think this is something that is not new, should not be new to the 21st century listeners.
No, they have déjà vu as well.
It probably goes back as far as human history is concerned.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that has come up time and time again throughout history. Because people try to explain what they are, try to figure out what is this.
Right, the sensation of doing something or experiencing something and it feeling as if it's something you've done before.
Yeah, I think that's basically summarizing really what a déjà vu is. I think it literally means already seen. So why are we talking about this? Because that's not a typical 23rd century stuff. Usually we speak about things that are happening in our time that are new to the 21st century time. So
yeah, but there is. I mean, by the end of the episode, so to tease it for our listeners, we will reveal that now we know what déjà vu is definitively. And but before we get there, we're going to go over some of the different theories that have been had about it over the years. Yeah,
it's a cliffhanger, By the end, no, not a cliffhanger.
Like I say, we're teasing it basically.
Yeah, it's a teaser.
And people who are fancy with their chapter markers, they'll skip ahead, or at least press the fast forward button a bunch.
Yeah.
But people who just listen because they like our voices, they'll get to hear the process.
Exactly. If we would be really clever, we would put all kinds of advertising in there until we get to the bit that everybody's waiting for.
Yeah, that would be cruel. So we're not that clever,
and we don't have any advertising.
That too.
But maybe like a brief recap, status quo 21st century, when basically in the time that you, the listener, live, as far as we understand it, Deja Vu was basically what Simon was just describing, a feeling of, hey, I have experienced this before, but then knowing this wasn't the case.
Right, because exactly, if it literally is something you've done before, well, then that's just memory. But you feel like you've done it before, but you know that you didn't.
Exactly. I mean, so like if it's basically eating a bowl of oatmeal or whatever, I have the feeling I've done this before. Yeah, every other morning, for the rest of my life. But if it's like, hey, I get this Olympic medal. Hey, didn't I get this before? No, I didn't. But of course, knowing that this isn't actually the case, you haven't experienced this before. It's been basically categorized as a brain hiccup or something like that.
Brain hiccup or exactly something going on for whatever reason. That's not defined, but something going on in your brain that makes it feel that way.
Yep. And then since the 21st century or early 21st century, there has been all kinds of theories that have been researched and either debunked or confirmed or whatever. And then we thought we'll mention some of them.
Yeah, exactly. Talk about them a bit.
Do you have any particular outlandish or grounded theory?
Yeah. And this even, I think there was the start of this back in the time of our listeners. Was the idea that the whole world, everything we experience, is part of a simulation. Yeah. That we exist within that simulation, and so Deja Vu is a glitch in the matrix, or some other kind of software bug rather than a brain malfunction, some kind of mistake basically in the simulation that is literally repeating an event. So it's not just that you think that you did it before, you did actually do it before, but it's somehow garbled.
Yeah, I think it's the Matrix was supposed to be something like the chorus verse, right? What we're having now, but then people are actually living in the chorus verse permanently, not realizing anymore that they have an existence outside of it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay,
so that's really, so by now we know there's no way we live in a simulation. So that was a nice idea based on a film, but it doesn't apply to real life.
I think, I'm not sure if it's considered similar, but in the early days of the cyborg chips, right? We all have cyborg chips in our body, allow us to change our appearance, cure us before we get ill, and so on. I understood that in the early days, sometimes there were software updates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And of course, this is a chip that influences your body, your physical being, and this occasionally caused actual deja vus.
Yeah, right. And it was specifically the software updates, because after the update was installed, it needed to restart the cyborg chip.
Yeah.
And basically restarting it was the issue.
And this caused your perception to kind of restart itself as well.
Yeah. And so then, people complained. They made it that the software updates are installed in place. You don't actually need to restart the cyborg chip.
Yeah.
So it's all good now.
No downtime. Your body keeps functioning all the time. Your brain doesn't malfunction. Yeah. So this was, of course, this was not the cause of the actual deja vus that human history...
Like not before the cyborg chip, but it was like an additional new reason, or a new cause of it.
Exactly so. But then the original deja vus have kept on occurring.
Yeah. Parallel, yeah. Yeah, and another one, this is even more, I don't think this is a newer theory. I think this would have also been a theory back in our listeners' time, that deja vu, it's when you are living a very boring life.
Yeah.
Or a very repetitive life, actually. So boring in the sense of there's not so many new things happening. And because you are doing the same thing day in, day out, so we said earlier, that wouldn't be deja vu, but sometimes it feels differently to you, and somehow you do feel like, well, I've lived this moment for literally this moment, not just that I'm eating the same type of cereal, but I've literally crunched on these particular ones.
I've heard this as well, and I did kind of like this theory, because it's essentially saying your body or your mind or the combination recognizes, wow, this is a very repetitive life, and it's like a natural reaction of your body to try to somehow make it more exciting by pretending, hey, there's something odd happening. You've experienced this particular thing before, so kind of like biologically making your life a little bit more exciting.
Yeah, even just if in that moment that you basically get to speculate, all these kinds of things we're talking about this episode. Like, hey, what is that?
Exactly. And it feels like, okay, so naturally your life should be a little bit more exciting, and there is a biological way of dealing with this, and that's déjà vu.
Yeah.
I like that. Very philosophical.
Yeah.
Yeah. Turns out it wasn't the case.
No, not that.
I like the more, how do you call it, conspiracy kind of theory where it's advertising. Mm-hmm. Of course, we've had Dream advertising for a very long time, like Dr. Dream. We had an episode about this.
But the free tier. Like when you have a paid subscription, you don't have the advertisements. A lot of people have the free tier, and there is advertising there. And sometimes the advertising, the whole point of it is that you don't consciously remember it when you wake up. But okay, it's possible to inspect their records, and it seems that sometimes parts of the year especially, basically one company just buys a whole block of advertising and just shows the same advert over and over and over and over. And then, as a result, people, when they are walking around in the world, when they're awake, something will trigger that memory, and then, okay, they really feel déjà vu because in their dreams they have experienced it over and again.
Yeah, which, I kind of understand, because the advertisement has become more and more personalized, right? So before, because you can basically decide what kind of dreams you want, free tier or not. But if you have the free version, advertisement gets kind of integrated in your dream, which means it's very personalized. And of course, they monitor what you do with your life, and they can make it seem very real. So you go shopping, like, I need to buy this thing that I always have, and you don't always have that. That was just in your dreams. So it works very well. But of course, because it feels so real, I can very much understand how this influences your déjà vu behavior. I've experienced this before. 50 times in your dreams, but just not in reality.
Right.
But of course, the Greeks already had déjà vus, and it definitely didn't have dream advertising. So this also didn't explain.
Again, it's similar to the cyborg chip software updates. It's a possible cause in the present.
Yep.
But doesn't explain it all throughout history.
No, exactly. So from the sound of it, there's something in there, and I'm not sure exactly how similar this is to déjà vus, but we've been creating more of them with our technology like the last 200 years, instead of figuring out why do we have déjà vus. Instead, we've been causing more of them with other reasons. Right. There were more theories.
Yeah, a couple more, I think. So one was, and this is a bit more paranoid maybe, but just the idea that perhaps déjà vu is a result of getting sick, so catching some illness that's been introduced to Earth by aliens. And okay, we officially met aliens 25 years ago. The paranoid angle is they were totally here hundreds or even thousands of years ago.
They've kind of said that they visited Earth before.
Sure, but the paranoid part is that they visited and specifically got us sick to give us déjà vu. That's a bit much.
I wouldn't say it's completely
the intentional. So maybe it wasn't intentional, but maybe it happened by accident.
Exactly. There's let's say a tiny chance that this actually happened. Not on purpose, and of course they've been doing it undercover, so there hasn't been that much contact, But have they really then been visiting us for hundreds and hundreds of years? I doubt that. Mm-hmm. So, but that's a theoretical possibility. But also then again, of all the alien sicknesses that we could get, we get déjà vu, Right.
Or at least that's one of the symptoms.
Yeah, okay. But you could hardly call it an illness, You don't get a runny nose or red eyes or...
True, and it doesn't really... Well, if it's I guess the idea is it wouldn't have to be an illness that's really severe.
Yeah,
or damaging,
But on the other hand, of course, alien illness, especially in the beginning when we met them, has been a topic of concern,
Initially, and then it was like, oh yeah, actually our biologies are so different, never mind. There's not even the slightest chance.
Exactly. So, but especially initially, there was a bit of a worry there.
Yeah.
But then it's like, if of all the possibly very dramatic alien illnesses that we could possibly get, turn green, fall over dead, whatever, stuff like this. If déjà vu is the only thing that we actually got,
then it's fine.
It's fine. Exactly. It's okay. It's actually kind of cool,
Actually, by the thing you're saying earlier, even if it's not the cause, it does liven up your day, or maybe not your whole day. It livens up your the moment you think such things, it's like it livens you up a little bit.
Exactly. A couple of exciting seconds. Okay, if this is an alien illness, I don't mind. As long as it doesn't happen permanently.
Sure. Right, to be living in a constant state of deja vu, that everything you do ever feels as if you've done it before, that would be a very... Maybe there's a different name for that rather than deja vu, yeah.
Yeah, it's like something like not just I've experienced this before, but I've experienced this all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A Groundhog Day would be if you had it that every day felt like literally that you had experienced that day already.
Ooh, wow.
Like from the outside, everyone around you, they'd be like, no, this is clearly a different day. But from your perspective, even though it was the first time you were doing something, it felt as if you had literally done that whole day before.
I've had one deja vu, actually, where I didn't just think, hey, I've experienced this before, but I've had this deja vu before.
Deja vu off deja vu.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the thing about Earth slowing down. That's actually, that was my favorite theory before the actual explanation was announced a while back, because that felt the most realistic, because the Earth has been there since the beginning. And it's exactly for us, and it's been rotating since the beginning. So like, during the course of humanity, Earth has been there and it's been rotating, and it's been very slowly slowing down.
Gradually.
Because it's gradually slowing down, like 1 second every 6 million years or something like that, you don't really notice. But it apparently, the theory was, this doesn't happen gradually. But occasionally it jumps a little bit.
Right.
But I mean, jumps a little bit. This is like nanoseconds or whatever. So you don't actually physically notice it with stuff falling over because it's so abruptly. But this resulted then in occasionally deja vus.
I see. It's the idea that, like, because it's slowed down some tiny amount, spinning slightly less faster than it was before, that your brain kind of jiggles in your skull a little.
Yeah.
Again, not like your whole brain sloshing around, but like the neurons firing kind of back up on themselves a little bit.
Yeah, I thought actually more of the impression that the world around you gives you, how this is translated to your brain. It's like a permanent stream of what's happening around you. And because there's like a tiny, sudden, unexpected delay, that what you experienced has already happened before it actually gets to you, and then you experience it twice.
Yep.
This sounds very philosophical, actually, now that I explain it.
No, at least the way I understood it as you just described it. I mean, I don't know if it's real, but if it is real, it makes sense.
Yeah. There's sounds, and this could also explain why the ancient Greeks or Persians or whatever already had it.
Yeah. Okay, and the final, before we get to the for real one, even though we've said some of these are kind of, but either way, before we get to the for real one, one last theoretical one is to do with basically a sort of combination of the CAM network, so the worldwide camera network, and our lenses in our eyes that we use to interact with that network. And basically being mix-ups in streaming data. Yeah. I
mean, that sounds very plausible, you know. I mean, I very rarely have my lenses completely transparent, so I just see the world as it is around me. Usually I have stuff overlaid on it at the sides, and sometimes I just see something else. You know, you can put in any camera anywhere on the world on your lens, and then you don't see where you are, but you basically look out of that camera.
Right. But I think the idea with this is, I mean, you could do it that way, or it could be that way. The reason that this is a possible cause of deja vu is for folk who are using, so they are looking at what they're looking at, but they are using the CAM network to see an enhanced version. So say they're going spelunking in some dark caves, and it's too dark for their regular eyes, well then they look through their lenses at the CAM feed, from their own perspective, but it's lower light cameras, so they can see much better.
Yes.
Okay, cool, they're walking around caves in the dark, they can see, but then for a moment maybe the cam network gets mixed up and they're seeing a live feed from maybe even just the person behind them or in front of them. It's like slightly shifted in perspective, or there's a slight time delay, and that's what makes it feel like deja vu.
I think this actually sounds like what a deja vu is, but then this is also then in the category of sounds very plausible.
And it's a recent, like you said, humans have been introducing all kinds of new ways to get deja vu, and this is not one that's been around longer than the CAM network and lenses.
I almost feel like we're having deja vus in our explanation. Didn't we kind of have this explanation before? Yeah, so a lot of technology creating more deja vus.
But the point of, well, not the point. So what we're about to say is the true one that existed before all these other ones, and is also the most, it's proven.
So shall I do the drum roll and then you explain it?
We can both do a drum roll on the table.
Drum roll. So this actual explanation for deja vus is parallel dimensions syncing up again.
Yeah, that's it.
And if you think about it, it's very simple. As we've established ourselves already doing the show or in one of the episodes, parallel dimensions are pretty much exactly identical to ours.
Yeah, there'll be some point of divergence.
Yeah.
Where the two dimensions split off from each other. But in most regards, they'll be very similar.
Yeah, and occasionally they are becoming identical again.
Exactly, and converge or collapse back into each other.
Yeah, exactly. So if they briefly split up and they sync up again, then you suddenly get the feeling, hey, I have experienced this before. And it's true, you have just experienced this before. Just before.
Exactly, in the moments just up until the point where the dimensions merged back together.
Yeah.
And that point where they merge back together, that's the instant where you feel the deja vu.
Exactly, and it's because the thing, like the few seconds where you thought, hey, I've experienced this before, this just happened a little bit before that in the other dimension.
Exactly.
A couple of seconds before. So that's why you feel like, I've just suddenly...
Right, and yourself from that parallel dimension, because they were, say, a couple of seconds ahead, they won't feel the deja vu. By definition, the one feeling deja vu is the person in the dimension which was a second or two behind.
Yeah, exactly. So if you have a deja vu, you were just a little bit slower than the other guy. Yeah, but also, once you have a deja vu, you know, hey, two dimensions just became one.
Yeah.
Apparently there's no such a thing where they briefly leave each other, split up. So if there's a dimension
you wouldn't have the feeling of it, yeah?
Yes, at least not a deja vu. Maybe there's something else you experience.
Yeah, but nothing like deja vu.
Yeah, exactly. And then
maybe
of course...
that's more like a sudden sense of loss.
Oh, yeah. Some sudden sadness.
Exactly, sadness or loss. And you don't quite know where it came from, but
yeah.
maybe it's that.
But also maybe then deja vu can be a happy thing, you know? Hey, you know, that
being reunited.
Exactly, the feeling of being together again. Yeah, but this is also, that's not, and that also explains why not everybody has deja vus at the same time, because the parallel dimensions are largely the same, with the occasional exception.
Right. So for the majority of people, there won't be this thing where something was slightly out of sync that's getting merged back together. It will just be perfectly in sync the whole time.
Yeah. Maybe you spilled a cup of coffee and everything else that happened in the entire universe was the same. Just you didn't spill this cup of coffee in the other dimension. And until the dimensions convert again, they exist separately. You clean up the coffee, you put the thing in the dishwasher, you put your cup in the dishwasher, suddenly everything is the same again. Brief moment of deja vu. Okay. Sounds very solid, huh?
I think so, and I'm sure our listeners are glad to have heard it, and I'm not sure. We'll see if we put chapter markers in to make it easy for them to find it all alone.
Also, I'm always wondering, like, if we reveal this, you know, does this take a little bit away the mystery of the 21st century? You know, because this is the time where people didn't know a lot of stuff, you know,
sure.
And now we're telling them it's like that, you know. Is this fun? You know, our listeners now glad that we've...
Well, are we giving too many spoilers?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh man, I was just really liking the mystery here. Okay. Well, listeners, if you want us to stop spoiling things, let us know or stop listening.
They should let us know. We
Yeah,
want
they
them to
should
keep
let us
listening, so let us know and we'll adjust what we talk about accordingly.
Yeah. So, and people do occasionally let us know things.
They do, yeah. And there's a question here. So it's a very brief one. So Arno asks, can robots fly?
This was a very brief email.
Yeah. Not even, they cheat. Well, they had the number in the subject, and then they had that, and then there was no actual text.
So the question in the subject and no further text in the email. But thanks, Arno. Can robots fly?
Yes, they can.
Yes.
They can get pilot's licenses like anyone else.
Exactly. Well, I mean, they can. Not all of them.
No. So not all people can have pilots or have pilot's licenses. Yeah, so
Yep. Same with robots.
yeah, they are as eligible as humans to get pilot's licenses, and of course, once they have a pilot's license, they can fly.
Yeah. And the main difference between humans and robots?
Sure, they can actually, so they can fly a plane like a person, but they can also, adjust their body to be able to fly itself.
Yep.
They still need the license. That's important for safety.
Yep.
But they themselves can become the plane.
And they can pilot all kinds of aircrafts, and easier, especially going into space. Robots
And
don't.
Spain, but
Yes. So robots don't need all kinds of precautions that humans need when they go to space.
either.
And also, let's say they crash a shuttle. For robots, it's usually kind of okay. For human pilots, less so.
Sure.
Yeah.
Depends how severe the crash is. Crashes don't happen so often. We're talking about crashes a lot here. Question was about flying. They can totally fly.
They can fly.
And for the most part, don't crash.
All right. Thanks, Arno. And thanks for the brief email, so we didn't have to read all of it.
Yeah. I'll let our other listeners, I'll let them know. Arno sent that email to michaellasagna5@gmail.com. So please send your emails to that same address, michaellasagna5@gmail.com, and put in the subject line the number 168, so that we know this episode of our podcast successfully went back in time.
All right. Then thanks for listening, and see you in 200 years. Bye-bye.